Commissioners, good afternoon, audience. It is Wednesday, March 26th. The quorum is present, and the Minnesota Senate Education Policy Committee will now come to order. Today we have one bill on the agenda that we need to hear quickly and send it back to HHS. We will then have the walkthrough of the A2 DE amendment that will serve as our committee, Ed Policy Committee Omnibus bill. So, but first up, we have Senator Kunesh's bill, which we'll be voting on to send it to, Health and Human Services.
I'm ready.
I know, yeah, anyways, okay. Whenever you're ready, Senator.
Thank you so much. I know you have big things today, so we'll get through this pretty quick. So this is Senate File 942. Minnesota state law recently or currently requires local child welfare agencies to implement a traditional child protection response for screened-in child protection reports of educational neglect. And educational neglect is 7 unexcused absences for children under the age of 12. We know that the barriers common at the root of attendance concerns are things like housing instability, transportation barriers, lack of reliable childcare, cultural and language differences, many unmet mental health and or medical needs of the child or family members, financial stress, lack of trust or relationship with the school, and many other unmet needs. So in other words, school attendance is less, and I think this is an important part, is less often an issue of parental neglect, but rather an issue of societal neglect where our systems are failing to support children in their families, especially in particular our families of color and families experiencing poverty. We can improve student attendance in Minnesota by implementing responses that are less punitive in the beginning, right away and first, and seek to address the actual barriers the child and the family are experiencing that get in the way of getting to school. This bill will allow local welfare agencies to implement a child welfare response rather than a traditional child protection response in reports of ed neglect cases where no safety concerns exist. This change will allow local welfare agencies to utilize community-based providers, family resource centers, or county attorney's offices as a diversionary response. And if the family does not engage in those diversionary responses, then a traditional child protection response can be initiated. The services must be culturally and linguistically appropriate, and funding is requested to help local welfare agencies implement a diversionary child welfare response like a pilot program, and they must include program evaluation to demonstrate program effectiveness so that more programs can be implemented statewide. That is my bill, and Mr. Chair, I do have 2 amendments. I have the A3 amendment.
Do we vote on it? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of the author's amendment, say aye. Aye.
And then
all those opposed?
Oh, pardon me.
That's okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Or the amendment passes.
Thank you. And then I have the A5 amendment that just kind of cleans up a lot of the language.
All those in favor of the author's A5 amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Both amendments pass.
Thank you. And then I do have a couple testifiers.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Michelle Miller, and I serve as the Child and Family Services Manager for Wright County Health and Human Services. One of the important points Senator Kunesh mentioned is that educational neglect is not an issue of child safety, which requires a child protection response. This is an important distinction and one that Wright County has recognized successfully addressing attendance issues using a child welfare response since 2011. As we know, child protection involvement carries a heavy stigma. Parents are fearful of becoming involved in child protection, of potentially having their child removed from them, and as a result are reluctant to work with a child protection social worker. Maintaining a child protection response to the issue of school attendance sets up automatic obstacles for families that are likely already experiencing numerous obstacles. Over the years, in Wright County and across the state, we've seen that the biggest challenge to families is mental health, whether that be of the parent, the child, or both. And then couple that with other difficulties such as financial stress, transportation, the myriad of things that the senator mentioned, trauma, and then layer that with child protection involvement makes for a mismatched response to school attendance. Our experience has been affirmed by the Wilder study of educational neglect diversion programs in Minnesota. They found that 63% of parents stated that their child had emotional or mental health concerns and that financial stress topped the list of challenges parents are experiencing. By using a child welfare response, we can lessen the fear associated with working with a county social worker and more easily come alongside families to support and engage parents to get to the root cause of the attendance concerns. This working relationship is so important to developing strategies with families and their networks to address the barriers, which then help set their child up for school success. Our data shows that the earlier we can become involved with families experiencing attendance issues, mental health, and the other challenges, the greater success we can have at getting the student to school. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up.
Chair Cwodzinski, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Shaver. I'm the Senior Policy Director at Ed Allies. We're education advocates for kids. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Senate File 942 as amended. And a big thank you to Senator Kunesh for authoring the bill and continuing her leadership to address chronic absenteeism in Minnesota. We briefly discussed this topic on Monday in this committee, but just wanted to remind members and members of the public why we're here. Our chronic absenteeism rates doubled in Minnesota from pre-2020 to post-2020. In the most recent year we have data, Minnesota students who are chronically absent missed at least 3 million days of learning combined. That's 3 million days of meals, 3 million days of opportunities to make friends and build relationships with caring adults, 3 million days of recesses, and 3 million days of all the critical things school can be for kids. It's very exciting to see another set of proposals, like what are in Senate File 942, come to light for what we as a state can do different and better to support students and families struggling to get to school consistently. We cannot allow the dust to settle and be comfortable with 1/4 of Minnesota students being chronically absent becoming the new normal. Minnesota's current response to attendance challenges is siloed, patchwork, confusing. It makes it difficult to differentiate students with different levels of needs and root causes leading to missing school. Think about all the vocabulary that schools, districts, counties, the state, families, and lawmakers have to deal with. Chronic absenteeism, consistent attendance, excused absences, unexcused absences, tardies, continuing truant, habitual truant, truancy, educational neglect, the 15-day drop, and so on. Are we sure everybody in this room has the same clear understanding of what each of those terms mean and how those puzzle pieces fit together to provide a support system to get kids attending school regularly? Do those pieces even fit together? Here's a quick pop quiz. In state law, how many tardies equal 1 unexcused absence? It doesn't say. And it does matter that it doesn't say that, because unexcused absences add up, and that can add up to child protection and truancy cases, and from district to district and even schools within the same district have different policies on tardies and absences that can lead to unnecessary county involvement for one kid, which wastes time and resources better spent on students really in need. Senate File 942 proposes new ideas to try and clean up this mess and create a more coherent system with checkpoints and off-ramps. We need ideas like what is in this bill to keep kids going to school, have adequate county involvement when needed. And so thank you to Senator Kunesh for not being okay with the status quo. Thank you for proposing something else. We owe our kids better than what we've got right now. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and thank you all for your service to our state.
And lastly, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Shaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jessica Webster. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Aid. And just really briefly, I also want to speak in support. Legal Aid wants to support Senate File 942. We want to thank Senator Kunesh and the members of the committee for the really thoughtful work on attendance this session. And we particularly appreciate this approach and appreciate the A3 amendment that acknowledges the attendance challenges faced by children with disabilities, particularly those experiencing poverty. and how we can potentially mitigate inappropriate referrals to the county and terminations of enrollment. So we feel like this is really good and important coordination, and we appreciate the approach. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Thank you, Senator, for bringing this forward. I think the list that Matt Shaver presented with that litany of attendance, tardy, unexcused, on the balance that you're fully aware of, do we let local districts decide how to define those things, or do we as a legislature have a statewide policy? And that's the things that you and I have struggled with for the last few years. And so anyways, our quest for perfection continues on this. So thank you. Any final comments?
Just thank you for hearing it today so that we can get it on to its next stop and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the kids.
So all those in favor of sending it to HHS, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our is the walkthrough of the ed policy bill of the delete everything amendment that is in the omnibus. Well, anyways, we'll begin the walkthrough with Senate Council. I believe Ms. Lewis and Mr. Arneson are team tagging this, and so I appreciate your work on this. I would ask members, we'll pause after every article and say, are there any questions? And then testifiers will be allowed to give their testimony after we walk through the entire bill. And so that's the plan. I just want to remind everybody how difficult this is, and that, but all of our hearts are in the same spot that, as ed policy and ed finance, what we're trying to do on a daily basis is leave this world a little bit better than we found it, and help our students solve as much of the puzzle as possible, and get them to, as close to self-actualization in the rare time we have them in our schools. And I just want to remind everybody, the Senate, the wing into the Senate chambers is etched in stone, this quote, and that quote was etched in stone by the sculptor that did it long before any of us in this room were born, and those words will still be on that wall long after we have left this world. But every day when we enter that Senate chambers, to our right are the words, "Next in importance to freedom and justice is popular education, without which neither justice nor freedom can be permanently maintained." And so that's a constant reminder to the 67 senators of kind of what we're up against and what we believe in. And so with that said, Ms. Lewis and Ms. Arneson, it's all yours.
Mr. Chair, members, begin with Article 1 of the...
Mr. Arneson, I'm sorry. I think I just got your gender inaccurate, so sorry about that.
Mr. Chair, didn't even notice. This is the delete everything document. It's in the upper right-hand corner. It's marked SCS 1740A-2. I'm going to walk through Article 1 first, and just for the information of members and others interested, if you refer to the bill summary, at the end of each section in the bill summary, there's a note in square brackets indicating which component or underlying bill this particular provision came from, but I'll make that note when I walk through as well. Section 1 on page 1 is from Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 2882, and relates to reporting legitimate exceptions from attendance from school. Section 2 on page 2, also from the same Cwodzinski bill, 2882, clarifies that a student is counted as in attendance on each day that a school employee is paid to supervise or provide services to that student. Section 3, also from that same bill, governs reports to the state or the county, and directs school principal to report to the superintendent list of names and last known addresses of all students who are kind of unexpectedly not enrolled in a term. So meaning that they were in school the previous term, they're otherwise eligible to continue at that school, and there's no indication that they've enrolled in a different school. Also, that section requires the superintendent to immediately make that list available to an authorized representative of a county agency whose statutory purpose is to enroll kids in school. On page 3, section 4, titled Re-enrollment, is also from the Cwodzinski Senate File 2882. There's 2 subdivisions. So the first subdivision 1 governs school districts' responsibility to notify local welfare agency of any student dropped from its roll for unexcused absences exceeding 15 consecutive school days, and requires certain information about that student in the notice. Subdivision 2 directs that the Department of Education is to encourage re-enrollment, and in fact that the department becomes responsible for re-enrolling the child, and requires the department to provide certain notification to the family of a child in that circumstance. On the bottom of page 3, section 5 relates to standards development. This is from the MDE language. The amendment is at page 4, line 13, and just clarifies that the standards themselves are not grade level specific, because that element of the assessment system is indicated in the benchmarks, the grade level elements. Section 6 on page 4 and a portion of section 7 also are from a Senator Farnsworth bill, Senate File 360. It's a modification of the concept presented in that bill. The language near the top of page 5 directs that the revision of the academic standards and benchmarks in math, next scheduled for the 2031-2032 review cycle. In that cycle, Algebra 2 must not be required as an academic standard. And in the middle of page 6, in section 7, here's the other piece from the Farnsworth bill, clarifying that as it relates to the graduation requirements, credit for Algebra 2 or higher is not required as a condition of graduation. The remaining parts of section 7 are from a small portion from the Farnsworth bill. That's the new paragraph H relating to a personal finance credit. And then the paragraphs I and J are from the agency policy bill. Page 8, section 8 is from Cwodzinski Senate File 2882. The new language on the top of page 9 requires that an individual student report of state assessment results or MCA results must include the number and % of days that the student was absent from school in the previous school year. Section 9 begins a series of sections, all from the agency bill. These all relate to the post-secondary enrollment options program, or PSEO program. Section 9 clarifies that school districts, charter schools, and American Indian controlled tribal contract school students are eligible to participate in the program. The new language at the bottom of page 9 relates to a situation where the pupil might be enrolled in a course for post-secondary credit, in which case the post-secondary institution must notify the student's school district if the student withdraws from that course or stops attending that course. Section 10, again, just clarifies that the charter school students are also eligible for these dual credit programs. Section 11, same purpose. Section 12 on page 11 strikes obsolete language relating to the limits on post-secondary institution advertising about its programs. This language last had practical effect in the 2019-2020 school year, and it's proposed by the agency to prune it out of the statute. Section 13, again, the purpose is to clarify that students at charter schools or tribal contract schools are eligible under PSEO. Section 14 relates to the Online Instruction Act. This is an MDE proposal clarifying that charter schools are enrolling districts for the purpose of the act, and making it clear that non-public schools are not subject to the act. And finally, near the bottom of page 13, that state-operated schools are also eligible supplemental online course providers under the act. Section 15 on page 14 relates to adult basic education, or ABE programming. The language comes from the agency, and at 14.22, you see the amendment there, extends the approval period for ABE programs from 5 years to 6 years to better align with common practice in other funding opportunities for ABE programs. On page 15, section 16 comes from a Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 2882. This is the section that modifies the kind of age threshold at which a student's absence from school is presumed to be the responsibility of their parents or custodians, or presumed to be due to that child's own intent to be absent from school. And it modifies that threshold from 12 years of age or older to 16 years of age or older. And finally, section 17 on page 16 is a revisor instruction, again relating to the PSEO statutes, directing the revisor to substitute the term district, charter school, or tribal school in other places in that range of sections, to clarify that students enrolled in those kinds of schools are eligible for these dual credit programs. And Mr. Chair, that concludes Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. Members, any questions or comments about Article 1? Or questions? Okay, Article 2.
Mr. Chair, members, Article 2 starts in the middle of page 16. It's the Education Excellence Article. Section 1 comes from Senator Mann's Senate File 2390, and it is a provision that responds to districts and responding to data requests, and allows them to charge a fee for the cost of staff time and such for separating public data from non-public data if a person fails to show up to gather the data they requested. Section 2, starting at the top of page 17, is from Senator Bolden's Senate File 1355, and it's encouraging districts to provide instruction on healthy aging and dementia. Section 3 is from the agency's policy bill, and the changes are on the page 18 in the middle, and it requires the commissioner to report language development outcomes from dual language immersion programs. And then moving on, section 4 starts on page 20, and that is from Senate File 1462, that's Senator Kunesh bill. And it is putting the commissioner in place of Pelsby for the rulemaking and training requirements for the credential for education paraprofessionals. So that is actually section 4 and section 5. Section 6 is again from the agency policy bill, and it is a section that relates to the school bullying and the definition for what's considered a remedial response. That's on page 22, and then in the middle there's a definition for familial status. Section 7 is another provision from the policy bill that's a conforming change, I believe, with the definition of familial status. Section 8 is another provision from the agency policy bill related to the bullying policy and what the State model policy, it's changing the word investigating to assessing and evaluating because with an OIG, investigating kind of takes a different meaning. Section 9 is on page 25. That is from Senator Kunesh's Senate File 1404 and related to the prohibition on American Indian mascots. And that section adds the Education Finance Committee for as another committee to receive the report on progress made for changing their mascots if needed. Section 10 on page 26 is another section from Senate File 1404 for Senator Kunesh, and it amends the exemption process for a district that now, instead of going to the tribal nations, it is then just getting a letter of consent from the federally recognized tribal nation in Minnesota that is located nearest to the public school. And the language on 26.8 is defining it in Minnesota is new. Section 11 is from Senate File 1048 from Senator May Quaid, and it is updating the language for sexually transmitted infections and diseases program. Section 12 on page 27 is from the agency policy bill, and it conforms the definition of suspension to be less than one school day. It's something that didn't get picked up when the definition was changed in other places in the Pupil Affairs Dismissal Act. Section 13 is another section from the policy bill, and it's related to exclusion, expulsion hearings, and that the school district is responsible for providing a written transcript of the expulsion hearing when there is an appeal. Section 14 is from Senate File 1462, Senator Kunesh, and it relates back to some earlier sections where the about the education paraprofessional credential and training. It's just striking that section out of the responsibility for rule adoption for Pellsby. Then section 15 is another section from Senate File 1462 for Senator Kunesh, and it is striking some obsolete language about the annual performance report on some testing that's no longer required for educators. Section 16 on page 30 at the top is from Senate File 1462, Senator Kunesh, and this is, we're going to write the third time. It's something that we've tried to correct and keep correcting, and now what's left is the sentence here that needs to be stricken because it's not related to anything anymore. Section 17 is on page 31. It's from Senate File 1462 for Senator Kunesh. And that is striking about requirement for a tier one teacher renewing their license to take the content exam if there's one available. Then section 18 is from Senate File 197, Senator May Quaid. This has been modified from what members saw in committee. This is allowing or encouraging school boards to have a process for 2 student representatives to serve one-year terms to advise the school board. Section 19 on page 32 is from Senate File 392 from Senator Abler regarding disposing of surplus books. This did have a small modification on 32.18. It just stops at an internal revenue code. I think the bill as it came before the committee had a requirement to file with the Attorney General's office. Then section 20 is another section from the agency policy bill, and it's updating or conforming the name to the kindergarten fall assessment versus kindergarten entry assessment, and delaying the requirement for implementation by 1 school year. Section 21 is Senator Kunesh provision from Senate File 1405, and this is a section to allow drumming at graduation ceremonies if requested by the school, APAC, or the American Indian Student Organization. Section 22 is from that same Kunesh Senate file and allows for drumming at school versus at a graduation ceremony. Section 33, Section 23 at the bottom of page 33 is from Senate File 2234, Senator Mann, and it's the changes on page 34, but it's for the updated, or the statewide health standards, including overdose recognition, prevention, and response education in the cannabis use and substance use education portion of the standards. Section 24 is on page 34. It's from Senate File 1336, Senator Cwodzinski, and this is language that has been modified regarding the Labor Day start for the 2026, 27, and 27, 28 school years. The bill, as it came to the committee, said that they could start before Labor Day. If you see on page 30, or line 34.17, it now states they can begin the school year on or after August 30th, and clarifying language that it doesn't apply to schools that are already permitted to begin the school year before Labor Day. And that's the end of Article 2.
Members, any questions on Article 3, Article 2? Senator Mayquay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I'm going back in my bill to where I put the question. So give me 1 second. Thank you. My question is on line 18.8 to 18.21. I'm sorry if this was in a bill, and I just don't remember it, but can someone talk a little bit about what this bill is or what this language comes from?
Council.
Mr. Chair and Senator Mayquay, this language came in the department's policy bill, and it's clarifying that when the commissioner is reporting language development outcomes, they reported on the target language of instruction other than English for all students who are in the programs, or enrolled in a program that the objective is improving or maintaining the student's native language. So it's reporting on the language other than English.
Thank you.
Members, anything else? And after we move on, you can always go back to something that you found while we were moving on to the next article, so, okay. To Article 3.
Oh.
Specifically.
Maybe I missed the vote on some earlier questions. I'll just come back when you're done.
Yeah, Article 1 and 2, correct. We're not on Article 3 yet.
So I can do 1 and 2, okay.
Correct. Or we can always go back, Senator Abler.
All right, well, I don't have that many, but.
Okay.
On page 211, I think we need to fix up that language. That's about reporting absence days if they're getting services. I think we need to amend that to clarify what you intend. That's the attendance if they're getting, that a school employee is paid to give them services. So we want to say that this is, that they're gone because they're receiving some services, like whatever. We discussed that before. That just needs to be. I think we agree on that. And then I'm sorry I was late. I had an army full of nursing home workers and long-term care workers. I was tardy, and I would excuse me, Mr. Chair, from being tardy. But anyway, on section 4 on page 3, did you get rid of that thing that talked about that age 12 to 16 on the truancy child protection? Did that not get in here? Or is that elsewhere?
Mr. Chair, members, that particular provision is on page 15
Oh.
in section 16.
Okay, yet to come. Anyway, I don't think that's innocuous, Mr. Chair. I think it might cause troubles you don't anticipate. And then finally, on page 34, the late start thing, I think we should just not do that. I think it's problematic for so many greater Minnesota operations. We had I think a robust discussion about that. So if I were king, Mr. Chair, and I'm not king, did you know that? I would not have that in the bill. So thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Senator. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think to Senator Abler's point on 2.11, just to put a fine point on it, every employee who is working is paid to provide services to a student every day that they're there. And so I think it should just say, that a school employee does provide services to a student would be to that student, I guess. But I think Senator Abler's point is well taken.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, every day that an employee is at school, they're being paid to provide services to a student. Whether they're receiving them or not is the question. I do have a question if you go over to 3.17, to the Department of Education to encourage re-enrollment. I have no problem with that or any organization or department doing that. I'm just wondering if that is something that the Department of Education has like the staffing and capacity to do. My guess is they don't, but I have been wrong before. It's rare, but it's happened. I will say that I'm not feeling totally convinced on Algebra 2 being gone. And then I am a year-round school advocate. I don't love summer learning loss, but I also am not super comfortable with the permissive language of the late school start. If we're not gonna have year-round school, then we have a summer, and we have a lot of businesses that rely on it, so I'll just throw out those comments too.
Thank you. Other member, Article 3.
Mr. Chair and members, Article 3 is the charter school article. It begins on page 34 of the bill. Section 1 comes from the MDE proposal. It provides a definition of competitive procurement process, which is kind of defined in a more robust way later in the bill. And then in the middle of page 35, beginning at line 19, requires that the market need and demand study include information that supports all of the proposed grades, sites, or programs for that charter school expansion or development. Section 2 is from the agency bill. The amendment in paragraph B clarifies that a charter school must comply with all of chapter 120B. And the new paragraph K provides that a charter school must comply with the limits on screen time for kids in preschool, pre-K, or kindergarten. And that limit is otherwise applicable to school districts. Section 3 on page 37 comes from Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 1311. So it relates to charter school authorizers and requires that a charter school authorizer include information in its annual report regarding the commissioner's performance review of that authorizer. And the small amendment in paragraph D at 37.24 requires that an authorizer participate in annual department-approved training. Section 4 is also from the MDE bill and requires that the authorizer and the merged school execute a new charter contract. I should say that this relates to cases where charter schools are merging, and in which case a new contract would be required. And the bill proposes to require that contract be executed no later than June 1st before the effective date of the merger. And the effective date of a charter school merger is always July 1st, the first day of the fiscal year. So it gives the agency a little bit more time to get their finance and other administrative processes set up for that new merged charter school. Section 5 on page 38 relates to a change in location of a developing pre-operational or operational charter school. and requires that a school in that situation must apply to its authorizer to change the location by submitting various documentation. I should say that that proposal also from the MDE agency bill. Section 6 on page 38 is from Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 2412. And it strikes some language here in this section. The stricken language here is kind of recreated later, so nothing practically changes in the law. This is just moving some language to a part of the code where it makes more sense to keep it. Section 7 is a combination of provisions from Senate File 1311 and Senate File 2412, both from Senator Cwodzinski. And it relates to membership criteria for a charter school board of directors. The new language begins near the bottom of page 39 and provides that a charter school board member who violates the provision prohibiting serving on more than one charter school simultaneously cannot continue to serve as a charter school board member, and in fact is ineligible to be elected or appointed to a charter school board for the next 24 months. And the new paragraph I provides that a charter school board member who may be paid for serving on the charter school board must not receive more compensation for that role than a school board member might receive in the school district in which that charter school is located. Section 8 comes from a Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 2412. This relates to charter school board elections, which are kind of generally not subject to the state election law. Here at paragraph E, you see the language that was stricken in an earlier section. The new paragraph F would be a new requirement requiring that an initial member or an elected charter school board member must file a written oath of office with the charter school's authorizer. Section 9 is from a Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 1311. Requires that in the new paragraph C on page 41, requires the charter school board of directors to establish a finance committee that meets regularly, provides for certain duties of the finance committee. In paragraph D, provides that a charter school board that is under corrective action for financial reasons as determined by its authorizer must include the authorizer in these meetings, and upon the request of that authorizer, hire a financial expert to assist the charter school. Section 10 comes from the agency proposal, and it requires that charter school board meetings be recorded by video recording, including audio, and maintained, archived for at least 1 year from the date of publication. On page 42, section 11 comes from a Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 1311. The amendment is located at 42.21 and requires a hearing relating to non-renewal or termination of a charter school contract to be live streamed. These hearings are already required to be recorded by audio, video, or by a court reporter, but this requirement would require a live stream of that hearing. On page 43, section 12 comes from Senator Cwodzinski's Senate File 1311. The new language is on page 44, and it provides certain restrictions for service on a charter school affiliated building corporation board, or ABC board. It requires that contractors must not serve on that board. Other affiliated individuals must not serve on that board. Does provide that a charter school employee can serve on the board of the ABC if that employee has no conflict of interest. Page 44, section 13 comes from the MDE bill. The new language beginning at 45.5 requires that when the charter school submits its audit report to the commissioner, that it include all supplemental information included with that audit. And the amendments in paragraph C beginning at 45.8 require the charter school also to include in that supplemental information its management agreement with a CMO or EMO, a charter management organization or an educational management organization for that charter school. On page 45, section 14 comes from the agency bill. The edit is very small. It's at 46.16 and is just a technical edit clarifying that this statement of assurance applies to ABC board members, not to charter school board members. It's an unintended enactment earlier. Page 47, section 15, relates to the authorizer performance evaluation report. This is an MDE proposal. And it requires that a charter school publish on its website the formal written performance eval from its authorizer and disseminate information about that eval to enrolled families. Section 16 is from the Senator Cwodzinski bill, Senate File 1311, relating to dissemination of information about the charter school. The new language begins on page 48 and requires an authorizer to publish on its website information about charter contracts, school performance reviews, notices to terminate, et cetera, regarding charter schools in that authorizer's portfolio. Requires a charter school to post a link from the charter school website to this archived information on the authorizer's website. And upon request of the authorizer, distribute certain information from the authorizer to charter school employees and enrolled families. On page 48, section 17, this is relating to a charter school procurement policy and the required components of that policy. This section kind of goes together with section 18 and 19. All three of these are from the agency proposal and seek to clarify the competitive procurement processes applicable to charter schools. So that's section 17, 18, which provides more robust definitions of procurement by sealed bids or procurement by proposals. And then finally, section 19 clarifies the conditions under which the commissioner can reduce a charter school state aid if it makes a purchase in conflict with its own adopted policy or if its adopted policy doesn't meet the statutory requirements applicable to the policy. And finally, section 20 is a revisor instruction from the MDE's policy bill, and it directs the revisor to recodify an existing subdivision regarding public accounting and reporting of CMO and EMO charter school agreements. And Mr. Chair, that concludes Article 3.
Thank you. Members, any questions about Article 3? Article 4.
Mr. Chair and members, Article 4 starts on page 51. The entirety of the article comes from a document that Senator May-Quade has been working on. And it's a SC 2998-2. There are some technical changes that have been made to that document that's in a -3, and those are not incorporated into the article as we see it now. The first change is on page 52 in section 1, and this is information that the department will be reporting to the legislature. That it comes from, the information in that report comes from the local literacy plans. And the addition is finding out information about the number of educators that are required to complete training under the READ Act that have received other training that meets the requirements of the training that's approved by the department. Section 2 is related to professional development under the READ Act, and the new language starts on page 54. This first part of it, paragraph E, addresses educators that are either new to the state of Minnesota or newly licensed, and they have not received the redact-type training, and that those individuals must receive training at their district that's been being offered through the Regional Literacy Network and facilitated by the local certified trained facilitator. Paragraph F is a bill that came through the committee and I believe is been passed by the Senate and has been sent to the House. And this adds another school year for the hours of instruction for an elementary student to be reduced in order for the teachers to be trained, and then adds secondary school students for the 2025-2026 school year and allow their hours to be reduced for instruction, hours of instruction to be reduced for their teachers to receive training. Section 3 is beginning of some requirements for licensure renewal for Tier 1 early childhood education licensee at a elementary ed or a special ed teacher who are responsible for teaching reading. They need to have received the, or be in process of receiving the evidence-based structured literacy training before their second renewal of their license. Paragraph B is the same requirement for a Tier 2. That training needs to be completed before the first renewal of that Tier 2 license. And then paragraph C says on 55.10, that's Tier 3. It's actually a Tier 2 license. See, that's trying to get their, applying to get their Tier 3 license through the experience pathway, that they have to demonstrate they've had the structured literacy training before the board issues their Tier 3 license. Section 4 is language that was modified from the agency's policy bill regarding the curriculum review cycle. It's a 5-year cycle that will begin in 2030, and that the department has to publish the procedure for reviews, and that the review process must use the rubric that was used to approve curriculum, as well as the culturally responsive criteria that was determined by third-party review. Then it also sets, if you look on page 56, the categories that the department uses for reviewed resources, whether they're highly aligned, partially aligned, minimally aligned, or not aligned, and clarifies on lines 56.16 to 56.17 that only the materials that are categorized as highly aligned actually qualify for the use of literacy aid or other state funding that's available under the READ Act. Section 5 is actually language is on page 57. This is a repeat in the licensing sections for the language talked about earlier regarding Tier 1 educators and needing to have or what requirements they're supposed to have for their training before their licensure renewal. Then Section 6 is the language applicable to a Tier 2 licensee. And then the corresponding language for the Tier 2 teacher that's trying to get their Tier 3 license through the experience pathway. That corresponding language is on page 58, lines 58.16 to 58.21. And that is the end of Article 4.
Members, any questions on Article 4? Wonderful. Article 5.
Mr. Chair and members, Article 5 is special education. Starting at the bottom of page 58, the first section is modified from Senate File 507, Senator Mann. This language amends the law that was enacted previously about language access plans and adds that that one of the reasons for a language, or needing a language access plan would be for families who require additional assistance due to a disability. Then section 2 is from that same, or modified from that same Senate file, and adds that a specialized program or services could be special education and a related individualized education program. Section 3 is from the agency bill, and this is clarifying about parental consent, and with the, that's included with the prior written notice when a student is evaluated for special ed, or the initial evaluation, or initial provision of services, that one consent doesn't extend forever. They need to have additional points of consent. Section 4 is again from the agency bill, and it is codifying court rulings and federal regulations regarding consent. And then section 5 is on page 60 towards the bottom, and that is actually codifying the current process for the state complaint process. And that came from the agency bill. Then the next section is section 6 on page 63. That is from Senate Files 1667, Senator Hoffman, and this is creating a developmental delay age limit working group. And Mr. Chair, that completes Article 5.
Questions, comments, Article 5. Article 6.
Mr. Chair and members, Article 6 is the School Nutrition and Facilities article, begins on page 64. The first section is from a Senator Rarick bill, Senate File 1979, prohibiting a certain new school construction on land located within 1/4 mile of a dump site or closed landfill. This is essentially how the bill was heard in committee, except that the new paragraph C that begins at 64.27 is new, and would the effect of paragraph C would be to exempt from the prohibition a school facility that was constructed on land previously used as a school site as of July 1st, 2025. Section 2 at the top of page 65 relates to the requirement for a school to offer a breakfast program. This section originally came from the MDE policy bill, and the intent of the section is to clarify that schools that participate in the free school meals program under a different section of law and their participation in that program already requires them, again, under a separate provision of law, to provide breakfast, that this, the earlier requirement for breakfast doesn't apply to those free school meal program participants. Section 3 on page 65 is just updates or corrects a citation to the Code of Federal Regulations that govern the summer food service program. And this was a proposal from the MDE policy bill. And that concludes Article 6.
Questions, members? Article 7.
Mr. Chair and members, Article 7 is a state agencies article, begins on page 65. Section 1 is from the MDE policy bill, and it adds a citation to federal regulations to clarify that parental consent continues to be required for school districts and charter schools to share personally identifiable information about students with disabilities with deed. Section 2 on the middle of page 66. This rulemaking clarification was an MDE proposal originally. It's slightly modified from the version that they introduced, but I think it accomplishes the same intent, which is to offer MDE flexibility to choose either an expedited or standard rulemaking process for implementing the statewide standards enumerated under paragraph A. And finally, Mr. Chair, section 3 on page 66 regarding catastrophic accident insurance comes from a Senator Dibble bill, Senate File 2685. This is one section from that bill, and would require the Minnesota State High School League to enter into a contract for catastrophic injury insurance policy that provides certain levels of coverage and has other certain policy features. And Mr. Chair, that concludes the whole DE.
We thank you both for the walkthrough. So we'll begin with our testifiers. We have 10 on my list here, so I'll just read your names, and if a couple could come up at a time. And Commissioner Jett, you're up first, followed by Scott Kroonquist and Roger Aronson are our first 3 testifiers. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner. It's good to see you. And just identify yourself for the record, of course, and begin when you're ready. Could remind all the testifiers, if you are referring to a line in the bill, we'd appreciate if you give the line number and the page number. That'd be helpful if you are citing a specific line.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Willie Jett, and I have the privilege of serving as the Commissioner of Education for the state of Minnesota. Thank you for allowing me time to comment on the Senate's education policy bill, and I especially thank you for including so much of the governor's education policy bill. The Department of Education feels that the provisions we put forward this year demonstrate our agency's responsibility of statutory integrity, make clear that accountability matters for all of our public schools, and live our values as the state of education agency. I thank the committee for putting an intentional focus on the voices of our students and young people as bills were heard this year. When students bring ideas they're passionate about to the legislature, it's our duty as the adults in the room to listen and to respond. I see much of those student voices reflected in this bill, and I'm excited for a future where those voices become the leaders in our state. Combining many of the proposals put forward by the Senate with the agencies provides a bill with many common sense solutions that advance priorities, create clarity, and enhance opportunities for students, families, and educators. I appreciate the Senate's continued focus on our American Indian students and communities. We support the adjustments to the prohibition on mascots depicting American Indians that also provides time and space for local conversations to determine what is best. I want to thank MIAC, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, for their leadership on this. Also, allowing drumming at graduation ceremonies not only builds upon the graduation ceremonies regalia legislation passed in 2023, but it also empowers American Indian parent advisory committees and students. Finally, thank you for including our provision to make tribally controlled schools eligible for all grants. This advances equity in common sense way. Excuse me. I'd also like to thank you for including provisions related to charter school and authorize their integrity. These proposals work together to create a more robust and accountable system for all of our students in charter schools and set more of our schools up for success. The inclusion of proposals to require more records and expulsion hearings, updating the meaning of parent in student bullying laws, clarifying nuances of parental consent for special education services, and codifying the federal IDA complaint process in state law empowers students and parents in an inclusive and welcoming teaching and learning environment. I know MDE's literacy team also appreciates the continued focus on improving our students' literacy outcomes, and we look forward to collaborating on needed improvements. And in that same spirit of collaboration, I would like to highlight the tremendous work that has taken place around attendance. From the legislative task force to the conversations during session, this has been a productive opportunity for new connections, targeted conversations, and a diverse menu of short-term and long-term solutions for for our state education system to consider to address our shared goals of increasing consistent student attendance and reducing chronic absenteeism statewide. While this issue area will inevitably require targeted investments to support a system-wide network of support for our most vulnerable students, the question of what can be done with urgency without straining resources and budgets is the question before us this year. The Department of Education looks forward to discussing the best legislative path forward on attendance this year, to addressing the concerns associated with cost and what solutions we can take on immediately to support this work of getting students back in school. And in line with attendance, I know there have been many conversations at the legislature around creative and innovative solutions around making school a more enticing and inviting environment to be in. Some are carried in this bill and others have gone to the Finance Committee. Some build off of the incredible work done in 2023 and 2024 to create a more inclusive and welcoming teaching and learning environment, and others are new or evolved ideas. As we work together on ideas like innovative models or modifying graduation requirements, the department stands ready to partner on creating workable frameworks that keep our students engaged in meaningful and inviting educational experiences. And finally, I strongly encourage the committee to adopt the Governor's Office of Inspector language. Since the initial creation of the department's OIG in 2023, we have worked together to enhance and clarify authority, and this continued partnership is critical to upholding program integrity and preventing fraud. And so again, I thank you for putting this bill together, for your work, and allowing me to provide some of my thoughts. And I also look forward to working with all of you to meet the task our constituents have given us. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Abler, do you have a question for?
I'm just curious if the good commissioner has to run off or if I can just ask him a question now.
No, I think after each testifier, because we are sitting pretty good on the time. So after each testifier, I'll pause and ask if there's any questions or comments specifically for that testifier. So fire away, Senator Abler.
Well, Commissioner, always good to have you here, and I've appreciated getting to know you over the years, and I appreciate your commitment to students and the many challenges that we face. And none of them are new, so I'm not going to go back on that. Although I did meet with some teachers in North Minneapolis today, and they're just feeling extremely challenged. And Mr. Chair, they have a hard time getting here. They say, I wish there was a way that we teachers could come tell you what we see compared to the leaders. And there's nothing wrong with the leaders that are here, but they have a story to tell that would be, as you would know, much more hands-on, and the commitment that they have and the concern they have, just you can see the anguish as they see, you know, reading scores, you know, in the under 50 percent, but in some of these risk groups in the 30% of even students in 11th grade. So anyway, so I appreciate that, and I know it's on your mind, but so Commissioner, when you go back to the home office, I know the governor has some proposals, and it's in your purview of duties to say this is the governor's proposal and this is what I'm recommending. But as you get into negotiations later on, I don't know where the bills will land up in the meantime, but the governor's proposal as it is for this budget cycle would cause Anoka District to lose $20 million more, including some programs that target at-risk populations, the compensatory pilots, and others, which have been really useful in helping Anoka serve students with, you know, all kinds of challenges, which you're more than well aware of. And I just wanted to comment to you that the aggregate, so that this latest piece could put 250 teachers at risk. And why am I saying teachers? Because they've already cut the admin. We've laid off reading specialists. And they're still short 12.4, not counting the latest cluster of 250. And so just to give you more burden, Commissioner, I'm telling you this as a fan, the teachers that are getting laid off they're going to be the young, excited ones, many of which are teachers of color that we're trying to get more in. So if you can just take that, getting rid of QComp is a $10 million hit, and that was kind of a reform that helps teachers to excel. And so if you can you can comment if you like, but I want to make sure you know that at least from the largest district, which has ostensibly the most capacity to adjust, they're out of levers, Mr. Commissioner. So just so you know, thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, and so Senator Abler, thank you for that statement and the passion with that. And if we're talking about the same district, I'm thinking about Anoka, Hennepin, and Corey as their superintendent. And so Corey and I We have numerous conversations on the telephone, and matter of fact, if today is Wednesday, we were together on Monday having some of these same conversations. You wondered if I was going to run off. Can't run off. I had knee surgery, so it won't be running anywhere. But with that being said, your comments in terms of the times that we're in, that's a definite superintendent, district, school board conversation. I've been in it. My colleagues here with the educational organizations, they've invited me to the table numerous times to have these discussions, and so I'm just looking forward to all of us working on this together. So thank you.
Mr. Chair. And thank you for that, Commissioner. I never doubt your passion and your concern, and I appreciate your rapport with the superintendent out there. So I'm just gonna, as you go back into the workshop, I have a feeling there may be a couple cycles of bills going, or how would I know? But especially when June rolls around and we're trying to get some stuff seriously done, if there's some way to get some flexibility to districts within the money that's available, because I think that there's many well-intended pots of money that are very useful, but when your house is on fire, then you maybe want to take your sparkling water and even use that to put out the fire, because it's, so if you could consider that going forward. I know there's a number of things that he would tell you and others would say it as well. So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say this once instead of after every testifier, but thank you all for coming in, Commissioner, and other testifiers to follow you. We look forward in the coming days getting this as close to perfection as possible, but as we all know, the Constitution begins with the words, in order to form a more perfect union. It doesn't say a perfect union. So anyways, thanks for coming in, Commissioner, and look forward to seeing you in the coming days. All right, next up, Mr. Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Scott Kronquist with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, and also speaking today on behalf of the Minnesota Association of School Administrators. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few comments, and thank you all for your work throughout this session. I'll start off by thanking Senators Kunesh, Cwodzinski, Farnsworth, and Kroon for their great work on the student attendance and truancy study group. And we appreciate the attendance initiatives in the bill, including clarifying reporting requirements and responsibilities for school districts and counties. We think these provisions, combined with a bill that the committee previously heard, and we are hoping will be in the Omnibus Finance Bill, that defines hours of instruction to broaden learning opportunities for students. We think you combine those and you're really going to enhance the high school experience for students and make great progress on addressing attendance issues. We also appreciate the inclusion of Senator Mann's bill to provide some guardrails around the data request, and we think these will still ensure transparency while protecting taxpayer dollars. We know that there is ongoing work on this language, and we look forward to continuing to work with Senator Mann and others on that important issue. We very much appreciate the inclusion of the 2-year exemption to the prohibition of starting the school year prior to Labor Day. As you heard in testimony, Labor Day will fall on September 7th in 2026 and September 6th in 2027. And it would be very challenging and disruptive to the school calendars if districts are forced to start after Labor Day in those years. We also appreciate the READ Act provisions, and thank you, Senator McQuaid, for your work and leadership and collaboration on these important issues. We think the clarifying language in terms of the literacy plan and also which staff are required to complete the structured literacy and the timelines, and also the flexibility with hours of instruction to make sure we can get that training done is very helpful. Finally, just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also Senator Rarick for the work on the language related to construction of new school buildings, playgrounds, and athletic fields within a quarter mile of a dump site or closed landfill. We appreciate that the change does not now apply to construction projects on land where school previously was sited. However, we do still have concerns about the quarter mile threshold. Representatives from the Pollution Control Agency did testify on this in the other body, and they stressed that there is nothing magical about a quarter mile. And in fact, that each individual site really needs to be looked at separately and investigated and a plan developed. So we hope that we could continue to work on that as we move forward. I'll stop there. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you. Any specific questions for Mr. Kronquist? Okay, Mr. Arns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Roger Arnson. I represent the Minnesota State High School League. First of all, I want to mention that we appreciate deeply the work that we've done with Senator Dibble on this issue over the last year and a half, and his willingness and thoughtful discussions that we've had as we've navigated the difficult questions related to catastrophic injuries. We appreciate the way that the language ended up here. There are some technical pieces that we want to draw to the committee's attention that we can talk about here, and then we can work on in the next week and as the bill processes through. If you notice, and Mr. Chair, you asked us to talk about section and line, the first sentence in 6624, it talks about that we're going to provide coverage in high school league-sponsored extracurricular athletic activities. We'd suggest you delete athletic. We have fine arts activities as well. How's the fine arts kid going to get hurt in something like this? We cover the travel pieces to an event, to and from the events, et cetera. We want to make sure that all of the kids that are in high school league extracurricular activities are covered. So just a technical piece there that you'd want to delete that. If you follow up with the last sentence that starts on 6629, where this talks about what the insurance coverage is, there it goes on and says that this is going to, and at 6631, say, cover students that are participating in interscholastic competition. That actually should say high school league extracurricular activities. Interscholastic competition would cover everything that was going on, and of course at a high school that aren't high school league activities, and this insurance would not be designed to cover that. So it'd be something we'd want to fix on that. The first sentence in the bill actually is where you want to be in this, at least as I see what the author's intent is, and that's saying that we must adopt a catastrophic insurance policy. The bill goes on then, and as it starts to talk about on line 6626, what the policy must cover. If you're going to do this, we strongly suggest that you say we adopt a catastrophic insurance policy, that is a term of art that covers a lot. I was making a list of some of the benefits that are actually in these policies, and there's everything from vocational rehab to college benefits to prosthetic devices, training for family members to help deal with these issues, travel benefits, et cetera. And they're not in the little list that we have here. And if you try to define it, we're going to leave something out, or we're going to have some other issues here, and primarily with covering medical care. We want the underlying medical policies to be primary to cover medical, because this is insurance that fundamentally is going to cover other things. I would mention that the number one benefit that this is going to cover is home health care and personal attendant care. Our current policy actually caps that out at $125,000 a year. I think you heard some testimony on Monday that that is like the major expense of what these cover. And so we want to make sure that we have as much ability to direct into that as possible. I think one of the numbers to think about, and what we're thinking a lot about, is if that coverage is $100,000 a year for that home attendant care, then $1 million is going to buy us 10 years. $2 million is going to buy us 20 years. $3 million is going to buy us 30 years. And so the question ought to be, how many years do we need? We think 10 would probably be too much, but there's some middle spot on that, and we'll continue to talk about that as we move along. But we'd strongly urge you not to try to define catastrophic insurance within the 128C and the high school league policy, and leave that, the high school league statute, and leave that as a term of art, so that we'd have the flexibility to buy that policy. These are called catastrophic insurance policies, and so we would meet that. We might say also, and the clients wanted me to have this on the record, that the purchase of this insurance is actually part of the Minnesota State High School League's constitution. We would never be without this insurance. It's one of our reasons for existence. I think we just want to make sure that it's not because of the mandate that we would purchase this. We would also always purchase this. There's a reference in here on the, I get the right line here for you for just a minute, that says we're supposed to cover student trainers, and that is on line 6630. We don't have student trainers, so we'd suggest deleting that. We do cover the athletes, we do cover student managers, and we do cover the cheerleaders. I think that's probably how that got picked up, but those are already covered under our policy. I think if you say on the front end that we cover the students that are, quote, involved in high school league extracurricular events, you're going to get the people covered here that you want to have covered, that we want to have covered as well. There's another reference then where we called them student trainers at 6630, and then on 6632, we just refer to them as trainers. Student got dropped on that one for whatever reason, and we wouldn't cover trainers. I mean, trainers are a very separate part that are part of the orthopedic clinics that back up the service on these teams and when we're out there. Again, we want to say that we're committed to working on this issue. As we mentioned on Monday, we did give you a handout that indicates what other states do relative to the coverage. I think Senator Kunesh had a question on Monday about the various costs of increasing these. I do have some information on that too, and can take that offline, Senator, when you want it. I do think one of the things that is a good thing about this is as you move the policy up, the base cost for buying our $3 million is currently about $750,000. As you move that up, the next numbers, it's not like you pay another $750,000 for $3 million. Those numbers are smaller as the coverage gets up there. So they're items that we can talk about in terms of the context of the high school league budget. But we did want to emphasize here that when you do the mandate for us like this, then that is a permanent ongoing cost that we would have to incur every year in the future as we go to cover that cost. So, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd answer any questions that you might have.
Anyone? Senator Abler?
Well, thank you. I have a question and then maybe a comment. So this $50,000 deductible thing, I'm curious, I'll just put it all in one question. So it's interesting that there's a desire to prescribe that. If that is true, who pays the first 50 and what happens now?
Mr. Chair and Senator Abler, we actually buy another policy that's a $50,000 policy that covers the initial accident piece. So if it's not covered by the student's individual health care, then we cover it under the policy that we buy. So it's always covered.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I'm just, as we're trying to, I think the high school league is amenable to the intention of the author. And so hopefully this can be sorted through a little bit going forward. And I also noticed that in the drafting, there was no award to the families. Was that impractical? Is that going somewhere else? Do you know where that discussion landed?
Education finance, perhaps?
Oh.
To be determined, Senator.
Oh, yeah, okay, and I just wanted to comment about that since I'm not there. I mentioned it, but I think that, you know, if it's, I don't know what we would give them if you gave two people $1 million, that's $2 million. How many athletes are there? 100,000 athletes in these programs? Or is there less than that? Do you know that, Mr. Aronson?
I'm sorry.
How many athletes and participants are involved in high school, state high school league activities?
I think the double count on that, the number of kids that involve the activity is like 170,000, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just saying, so 100,000 people times $20. I think a lot of people wouldn't mind chipping in something, even to set up. I mean, I don't see it as the high school league cannot just write a check for $2 million, but in the fees, having been a parent of at 1.6 different athletes, just to mention that. So I had, you know, there was a lot of sympathy on that, or that's the wrong word. But there was just a lot of feeling for the families and how they got there. And also if they had just have a little, just in case, they would, maybe some of the families would be a little more careful. And I know in one case we were playing football and I'll say Mounds View. This Mounds View player got out of control and he spiked my kid head first and the coach just sat there and watched. And so maybe we'd stop some of that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Shaver, followed by Maren Christensen, followed by Casey Rutherford.
Chair Cwodzinski, members of the committee, good afternoon again. Matt Shaver from Ed Allies. Thank you for the opportunity to share our feedback on Chair Cwodzinski's policy omnibus proposal, SF 1740, as amended. First, I want to thank committee staff, partisan and nonpartisan, for your professionalism and responsiveness at this session. You answer questions, are receptive to feedback, And most importantly, from just a good government standpoint, you make it easy for members of the public to participate in the committee process. And that stems from the bipartisan leaders on this committee. More often than not, substantive, hard, reasonable conversations happened here. And I wish it was unremarkable that that was happening, but these days it's absolutely worth highlighting when it does happen. So thank you for that work. There are 3 areas we want to highlight, and we're excited to highlight to support in the current omnibus bill. So the inclusion of the attendance provisions that are here, very excited to see that, thank you. Policies that add accountability and transparency tools to the charter sector, and then the READ Act provisions. And shout out to Senator McQuaid for her ongoing stewardship and collaboration around the READ Act. You dove into the murky waters of the alternative pathways to licensure this year, and you've come up with proposals that are sensible and supportive. So thank you for that work, and that conversation continues. Our main area of concern is Article 1, Section 6 and 7, which repeals the Algebra 2 requirement. Removing this requirement will lead to tracking of low-income students, students with disabilities, students learning English, and students of color into lower-level math courses. This will set students up to not be prepared for Minnesota colleges and universities who require algebra for admission. For example, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus requires 4 years of high school math, including 2 years of algebra. If the graduation requirements are changed, a Minnesota high school diploma will not qualify a student for our state's flagship institution. Rhode Island has recently taken a different approach, using the entrance requirements at their flagship university to guarantee a high school graduate is qualified for admission. So they shifted their high school graduation requirements to line up with the admission requirements at their colleges and universities. None of this means a kid has to go to college. It means our high schools have prepared them to if they choose that route. We support a high school diploma that opens the widest door possible for students, regardless of their plans after they graduate. Removing the Algebra 2 requirement closes that door a bit. Now, I know there's limited latitude in this committee for discussing what's not in a bill, so I'll tread very lightly and very quickly and offer praise for something not here, as well as a nudge for something else not included in the bill currently. I want to thank you, Senator Cwodzinski, for resisting the urge to backtrack on the student-focused discipline reforms made in the last few years. Maintaining the limits on suspensions for our youngest learners, as well as keeping seclusions, the act of confining students with disabilities alone in a room in a public school against their will, a tool of the past, is commendable. Thank you for holding the line for kids. And I'll finish here. It is disappointing not to see more tweaks to our licensure system after the teacher shortage hearing this committee held in January. There are around 2,000 Tier 1 teachers leading a classroom in Minnesota this afternoon. They are disproportionately teachers of color and are working in difficult-to-fill roles like special education. They are working with kids right now. State law requires schools to lay all of them off this spring, regardless of the district's budget situation, staffing needs, or how good that teacher is at teaching. Doesn't matter. See ya. So while it's great that Article 2, Section 17 no longer requires a Tier 1 teacher to pay to take a test they didn't even need to pass, how about they are able to keep their job, have the opportunity to keep their job, or to be able to use a mix of their experience, the professional development and mentorship they receive to move up the tiers? Something to consider maybe. I want to thank you again, Chair Cwodzinski, for your bill and leadership. Thank you to the committee members for your public service to our state and commitment to our students.
Thank you. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Shaver, I want to thank you for bringing forth the point about Algebra 2. You know, I said I wasn't feeling it. And I think a lot of times we think of like preparing students for college as being like you graduate and then you immediately go to college. A lot of people decide to go to college later in life. They don't know what they want to do yet, or maybe they take some time off. Maybe they have kids early and they can go later. And it really, I think of friends that I had in high school who waited until they were in their mid-20s to go to college and then said, you know, I know what I want to do now. And to learn at 25, like, hey, I figured out what I want to do. I want to go to college. And they'd be like, just kidding, your diploma didn't qualify you for that. Like, that would be really, that would just not be preparing people in the state of Minnesota to achieve the things that they've decided to achieve. So I just want to put a fine point on that, because there's nothing that worries me more than kind of cutting the rug out from under people without them even knowing, right? You go through college or high school and you figure what I need to learn is what they're teaching me here. And it would be really heartbreaking to learn like that we changed those standards and someone's future was taken away from them without them even really knowing.
Mr. Chair, could I just add one more thing briefly on that?
Sure.
In that situation, Senator McQuaid, the option is developmental and remedial coursework at the college for 0 credit and money. And that costs time, and the persistence numbers that the research shows us starts falling off a cliff, especially for adult learners at the college level, where you're taking 0 credit and it's costing you time and money and not moving towards your diploma at the college level. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Maren Christensen, Casey Rutherford, Denise Dietrich.
Thank you so much, Chair Cwodzinski and committee members. My name is Maren Christensen Hofer. I'm a parent of a child with a disability, and I serve as the executive director for the Multicultural Autism Action Network, which is a nonprofit organization that serves families of children with disabilities, specifically in our multicultural communities. I, too, would like to thank everyone for the incredible work that's gone into bringing us to the place where we are with the Education Omnibus Bill. We really appreciate the collaborative effort, and we appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations. I would like to focus specifically on Article 5, which refers to special education, as that is an area that our organization really focuses on. First of all, we'd like to say thank you for the information in sections 3, 4, and 5 about prior written notice in the state complaint process. What this is doing is basically codifying in our state law some of the provisions in IDA at the federal level and in the court rulings, and we really appreciate that effort to strengthen our state law. We do have some concerns about Article 5, Sections 1 and 2, which refer to the language access plan, and we really appreciate Senator Mann's leadership on this issue. But our concern is that this really doesn't go far enough to address the problem of inequitable access to the IEP process. Having a plan is a really good start, but as we mentioned when we testified, what we really need is a process. When families have had problems with accessing the IEP process and have tried to file complaints in the past with the Department of Human Rights or the Department of Education, the question they are asked is, did you follow the process? And right now, we don't have one. The proposed language gives us a plan, but not a process. And Senator Cwodzinski, as you mentioned, we're trying to get towards more perfect. We really think we need a process to kind of move us in the right direction here. Without that, we're not really solving the problem that you heard about in testimony that was brought forward by families. Secondly, we're concerned that there's really no enforcement mechanism with a plan. By including a specific process, that enforcement mechanism becomes the dispute resolution process that's available for MDE. And finally, we'd just like to reiterate that if a plan is not followed, the students and the families are the ones that are harmed by that. It's never the school district if the plan isn't followed. So we would really like to continue to work on that language and strengthen it a little bit so that we make sure that the needs of families and schools, and especially our students, are met. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Casey Rutherford, and I work in the Department of Learning for Inver Grove Heights Schools. I'm here to advocate that all students should experience all the high school mathematics benchmarks. This relates to page 5, lines 8 and 9, and page 6, line 13, where they are looking at cutting Algebra 2. I taught math and physics for 16 years. I've taught everything from basic skills math all the way up through calculus-based physics. It's true, I was often asked, why are we learning this? Why do we need to learn this? And through the years, I ended up developing an answer that I thought was pretty satisfying for both myself and for students. And the answer was opportunity. I wanted to ensure that each and every student had every opportunity potentially afforded to them as they moved past high school. I wanted to make sure that they were not pigeonholed for lack of exposure or because of lack of prior success. I had a student who I think about often. He was not successful in my class, and yet he ended up going on to get a physics degree. I asked myself, what if we had written this student off? What if his D grades had meant that he didn't have that opportunity? I don't want to systematically take away opportunities from students across the board statewide. I agree that math should be more relevant. All of the recent core standards revisions have shifted an understanding of how we look at standards from what does a student need to know to be able to be successful in college in that particular subject area to what do we want all students to come away with as a broad understanding in that particular subject area. The 2022 math standards in particular are based on research on what students need to learn to be successful no matter their post-high school path. This is why there's an increase in statistics and data benchmarks and a decrease in algebra benchmarks. This is why context has been added as a specific focus so that students can look at problems in a context that actually matters. This is why we have more data benchmarks so that they can be looking at those contexts and influencing and looking at the influences on their daily lives. Instead of learning about exponential functions just on an abstract basis, students can model the rising tuition fees or look at infectious disease rates. I'm currently co-leading a task force through the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and we've gathered secondary teachers, university professors, and other stakeholders together, and we're having conversations about implementing these new standards. And we're particularly going to put out guidance to high schools about what the new standards should look like as they're implemented there. Specifically, we're giving guidance on what the increase in data and statistics looks like and how schools can handle that. And we're asking schools to consider the relevance aspect to make sure that they're making this a good experience for kids. I do want to point out these same arguments could apply for the science modification that is on page 8, line 7, and that we shouldn't be looking to replace science standards with a health science alternative for the same reasons. I would hate to deprive any student the opportunities that come from a strong foundation in mathematics. Please do not dilute the high school math experience by lowering expectations and providing non-math courses as alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dietrich, Mr. Carlson, and Ms. Snyder are next. Fergus Falls School, right? Thanks for being here today. Is this class actually called State and Local Government? Huh. That's awesome. Thanks for being here. Yeah. That's so wonderful that you offer that class, so thank you for that. And thanks for being here, students.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Denise Dietrich, representing the Minnesota School Boards Association, which serves all 331 school boards across our state. So thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments on the provisions in the Education Policy Omnibus Bill as amended. So I will begin with Article 1. We appreciate the provisions in Article 1 that would help better understand absenteeism and to improve student attendance. We commend the working group's work which represents a crucial first step, and we are committed to ongoing discussions to address this complex issue. In Article 2, I'd like to address the public data requests. We support the language that allows school districts the authority to seek payment for the costs associated with redacting data, as well as from individuals who request data but fail to retrieve it. This is a reasonable step toward transparency while managing the associated administrative burdens. In the area of mascots, we appreciate the process outlined in Article 2, which allows districts with American Indian mascots to collaborate with the nearest tribal nation to obtain a letter of consent. This respects tribal sovereignty while providing a clear path of local compliance. In Article 2, we also are pleased with the shift from must to encourage regarding the provision for student representation on local school boards. We firmly believe that the local school boards are the best positioned to determine a locally determined process for including student representatives on the board. In regards to the calendar, we appreciate the provision in Article 2 that grants school boards the flexibility to begin the school year on or after August 30th for the 26-27 and 27-28 school years. As we testified, this flexibility offers valuable planning time ahead of standardized testing and provides options in case of inclement weather disruptions. In Article 4, under the READ Act, we appreciate the collaborative efforts reflected in Article 4 to expand the professional development hours under the READ Act. Flexibility is the key, and we value the inclusion and the inclusive approach that the author of this bill has brought forward. In Article 5, we appreciate the modifications to the language access plans outlined, which improves the processes and procedures for providing effective language assistance to students and families with disabilities. In Article 6, we appreciate the continued dialogue on the issue of schools located near landfills. While we acknowledge the clarification regarding new construction is very helpful, we continue to advocate for the incorporation of the recommendations from the Minnesota Control Agency. And then finally, MSBA respectfully requests that any new coursework related to health be directed to the existing health standards implementation process. We have detailed our rationale for this request in our letter, which has been included in your packets. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our perspectives with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next.
Ready? Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Joel Carlson. I'm here on behalf of the community of Minnesota Resorts, and I'll be very brief. We have great respect for the difficult decisions you have to make as you balance the competing interests in the state, and allowing schools to start before Labor Day is one of those decisions, and we respect that. We've had post-Labor Day school start times in Minnesota since 1986. We had a brief window where it was September 1, and then we went back to post-Labor Day. We've had the current law in place for almost 25 years. We've had Labor Day be early and late. We've made it through. This is a vitally important issue for the people that I represent. They have a very short window to run their seasonal business. It's important for all of tourism, but maybe more so for the people that I represent. And so we would ask respectfully that as you make this a more perfect bill, that you consider removing Article 2, Section 24, and keep the law the way it has been for a long time. We know how it operates, and we think that it works well for all of the state. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Ms. Snyder?
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Caitlin Snyder, representing Education Minnesota. We represent 84,000 educators across the state. I'd like to thank the committee for their focus in their omnibus bill on attendance and the READ Act. Those are two very big, important issues for our state. But part of the reason why you were able to focus on these issues is that there was a log jam of student-centered policy that y'all took a chainsaw to last year. So thank you for your innovative work in 2023 and 2024 and giving us the opportunity to have such a slimmed down omnibus bill this year. Couple of items I want to highlight that we're strongly in support of. We're in support of the language carried by Senator Mann relating to data requests. There can be some really predatory practices that happen at local school districts or through PELSB, trying to find our members' contact information, banking information. We think it's a step in the right direction. We have a position in support of a pre-Labor Day start, the language that's contained in 34.14. And we appreciate the charter school recommendations contained throughout Article 3. Minnesota is a pioneer in charter schools, and sometimes that's great. Nobody knows who the second person in space was, but sometimes it means that we're learning from other states. And so the financial transparency items that are coming into codification here, these are good steps forward that we expect from our traditional public schools and should extend to our charter schools and authorizers. As Ms. Christensen-Hofer said, we appreciate the language on about page 60, which is sort of a double bobby pin approach in case we have any issues with IDEA at the federal level. And I appreciate working with Senator May-Quade on the READ Act, including language at 5227, where we will have statewide information on trained educators, but not district level, to try to keep some sort of anonymity with our members. And I appreciate the approach that Senator May-Quade is taking with the licensure renewal, trying to make sure that all of our classroom teachers teaching elementary education or special education, no matter how they came into the classroom, have the training to support our students. I'll end with two questions you might want to dig into. 63.5, this is related to the developmental delay working group. We appreciate the two members of Education Minnesota on the working group. There was a working group I was planning on paying attention to last year that didn't have to follow the open meeting laws, which I didn't know they could do that. So just raising the question about whether or not you want this committee working group to be open to the public, and if so, I think that might need to be a little bit more clear. And then this came up in the other body. We do have some questions about the language at 8.7 relating to science and health standards that came from the governor's budget, or excuse me, the governor's policy bill. It's my understanding that what that language is trying to say is you have to take a chemistry or an earth or a biology science class. And if you had a health class that was also a biology class, then that could count as your biology class. But the way it's framed, I think, is a little confusing because a health class does not necessarily fulfill the science credit. So I think that there could be some clarifications there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. And lastly, Khalid Rogers.
Hello, my name is Khalid Rogers, Executive Director of Catalyst for Systems Change, and I'll be brief here. Chair and members of the committee, just want to say thank you for including Senate File 2234 and the Education Omnibus Bill, and for recognizing the urgency of equipping students with life-saving substance use education. Special thanks to Senator Mann and for championing this effort, and for Senator Cwodzinski and the committee members and staff for creating a space to hear directly from the youth. Considering lived experience ensures that our laws reflect the real challenges students face and leads to more effective, responsive policy. As you consider the amendment, we respectfully propose a 7-word clarification to Subdivision 1, Statute 120B.021 after substance use education. We suggest adding includes overdose recognition, prevention, and response training. This addition strengthens this bill's intent and ensures schools have clear guidance on addressing overdose response, an urgent and growing need. Thank you for your continued commitment to youth, student health, and also youth-centered policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all testifiers. Members, any 60-second comments? Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, 60 seconds is plenty. So this is the first step of many to get some product out of the education topic, actually into law. And you heard my comments to the commissioner. So this bill is fine. It does a few things, but I won't be in the meetings that decide what the Senate's going to bring forward in the finance side and the targets. I'm not part of those meetings, but I do hope that as those meetings happen, that the net effect on the districts is remembered even more than before. I think there was plenty of good intention in the omnibus from before. I'm not sure people expected it would have such a hard effect to implement some of those things, and that where there the significant reductions across the state. So as we go forward with this version, if there can be a way to make sure that we can work to rebuild the districts, and if they could at least kind of break even, and work to strengthen their reading programs and their paras and all those that are really have taken a hit that nobody expected, that would be just a philosophical thought. And I say that to a group of people who I know mean well and want this to work just as much as I do. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abler. Well, this concludes our business today. We'll be bringing this bill back up for markup and passage next Wednesday. We'll not be meeting on Monday, so Wednesday, April 2nd. Committee members, I implore you, please come find me or anybody on my staff in the meantime with any suggestions, language fixes. I want this to truly be a collaborative effort and a collaborative process. So if you had any epiphanies or takeaways today, again, please do come see me. This concludes our business. I'll see everybody next week, and thank you for your attention and your attendance today. We are adjourned.